This is Christy O'Connor with Art Hustle. We are continuing our conversation series for our current exhibition, Thoughts and Prayers, Another Round of Vacant Stares at Chashama Matawan in New Jersey through September 19th. I'm here today with George Lorio. Hi, George. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Glad to see you.
Great to see you. George has 4 pieces in the exhibition that we're going to talk about today, and he also has a upcoming solo show and new body of work that he is working on that we are also going to discuss today. George was born and raised in New Orleans. It framed his vision of life. It was and continues to be a place of extremes, beauty and decay, religion and ritual, customs and iconoclasm. From that experience, he acquired an excitement for visual matters, colors, forms, and even artifacts. Having lived on the border with Mexico for 10 years, changed his view of contemporary culture and our collective social responsibility. At the time of the 9/11 bombing of the Twin Towers, New York City, his sojourn as a professor at the University of Texas in Brownsville on the Mexican border altered his aesthetic, viewing the ambient drug wars, the desperation of immigrants, and the collapsing Mexican democracy due to endemic political corruption, and perceiving the curious lack of commitment for dialogue to offer solutions for the growing racial division, wealth inequality, and environmental decline in our own nation. He changed from an insular focus and to embrace more topical issues. He taught art in 4 colleges and universities in various parts of the U.S. for 33 years. During that time, he's aggressively pursued the development and exhibition of sculptures designed and produced at those venues. So, George, you have an extensive history. You've traveled the United States. So currently you're living in Maryland, correct?
Yeah, Rockville.
And are you still a teaching professor?
No, I retired from the last place was Delaware State University, historically black college, and that's in Dover, Delaware.
And so you're focusing on your art full time now, then, correct? Nice.
So it's a full-time job. That exciting.
Yeah, and you work primarily in sculpture, and you have your process is very interesting. Would you like to discuss the process in which you create?
Well, I start off with an idea, and then the idea becomes more and more apparent and developed as I sort of live with it. And so I might do a sketch of something, and then sometimes I'll just sort of let it sort of savor inside me. And the body of work that I'm working now, these trees, I find myself walking through this county park twice daily as a point of exercise, because I used to swim, but now that the pools are all closed, you know, the bathtub is just a little bit short for lap swimming. And so I do that as a vehicle for exercise, but then it became an aesthetic experience as well. And just looking at the trees and realizing how vital they are for our environment and how vulnerable they are. To me, it's been an exciting sojourn, but also sort of arresting, because the delicacy of not only our immediate environment, but basically the world is on a precipice. And I think we have to start thinking of economic change as well as ecological change as a way of dealing with this problem, because it's not going to go away. So I make these things that kind of look like trees. They kind of look like stumps. Sometimes they really echo an actual stump that I found, but they have motifs in them that I build that have echoes of maybe goddess cultures with the spiral, or the idea of shapes and forms that are literally fabricated, that have pattern orientation to work. So that they're not really, a biologist would not find these viable trees. They're artist statements. And so in that regard, I like people to think of them as ways of looking at this phenomenon of the tree as a poetic but also a very, very necessary vehicle for keeping the planet's life alive.
Yeah, and so yeah, we're gonna take a look at these sculptures that have been inspired by the trees that you've been finding on your walks and whatnot. But you had also mentioned about the result of parking lots, and how that and construction has been inspiring this vision as well.
Yeah. You go by and you see a parking lot being constructed. There was one that was not far from the house, and it's basically a nice, middle class or upper middle class shopping center. And they chopped down 5 trees that probably, given the size of the trunks, they were at least 100 years old for 8 or 9 parking places. I think that's our value structure is skewed. You're not going to replace an almost century-old tree that's relatively healthy and it hasn't reached its maximum lifespan with a sapling that's going to be able to produce as much oxygen replacement as that older tree. And so I think we have to start realizing that some of our development has to be put in context of what it is that we are sacrificing in order to get that development. Our culture needs to change, not only in terms of what the other pieces that you have, the idea of guns and gun culture, but also in terms of the idea of allowing people of different points of view to live in our ranks with equal status. The idea of a cultural equality, not only an ecological one, but a cultural equality must be the progressive direction that we're going to have to move, where perhaps the gun culture, the idea of racial equity is also having to be addressed, not just the environment per se, but our cultural environment and cultural milieu of who comes in and who does not.
Yeah, exactly, and who we're valuing and what we're valuing as a culture and a society too. So I'd like to share some of the pieces that you have that you're working on for your solo exhibition. While I put the screen share on, George, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your solo exhibition coming up?
Well, it is the newer work. It's the trees and the organic pieces that really kind of look like they might be derived from trees. Like this is the one that's on the screen right now is clear cut. And I was really thinking about what we do when we do start removing forests. We just literally clear cut everything. And there's a metaphor here of the bark literally becoming the hands, the sort of the perpetrators of this sort of loss and travesty. But as I said before, these are fictions of trees. They really are, in a sense, very stylized. They are made of the trees themselves. The sticks are put together in sort of a strange presentation of these concentric circles of tree rings. But it's once again very poetic rather than a representational or realistic presentation of it. But the hands are literally carved or cut from bark. I use power tools a lot. Sometimes I do carve things. But I use a lot of power tools. The tree trunks themselves are literally on a constructed armature. I design everything so I can carry it myself. So this installation breaks up into smaller units so I can carry it wherever and transport it. Because transport is an extremely difficult issue when it comes down to it. It's very expensive to crate these things and ship them.
Absolutely.
I do a lot of hand delivering.
And what is your process for making the tree ring trunks?
Armature, which is sort of a skeleton that's vaguely reminiscent of what you see on the outside, but that's before there's this overlay of cut twigs. That's what the little circular motifs are. twigs that are cut and then glued to the armature. And then the bark is more twigs that are cut horizontally, sort of like tomorrow at a barbecue, you'll slice your hot dog down the middle so it's a nice long thing. Well, think about that slicing of the hot dog as I'm slicing these twigs to formulate my sort of stylized version of bark for the upright trees. I do see these as formal in one regard and narrative in the other, because they're stylized, and in that regard they are not truthful in terms of what a tree would be, but they do echo that. And so in the context of how I presented it, most people, when they walk up to it, they'll say, oh, that's a weird tree, or they will start understanding something about this being from nature. But it's by no means a trompe l'oeil, fool the eye, a real tree.
And the hands around the bottom, they almost look like fallen leaves in a way.
Yeah, I really like that. Thank you. That's really a nice way of also phrasing it. I have two grandchildren, two boys, and they just love when I've had to stage this piece, because they try to match their hands with the hands, because there are some small hands. They're 5 and 8, so there are some large hands and small hands. So there's a certain quality of toy with these things, which I think is sort of a way of allowing people to have access to some very, very uncomfortable things, including the pieces that you have in your show. There's a certain quality of them being almost toy-like, but there's a toy-like use that has a bite to it. So it's not necessarily completely like, Toys R Us or going through a nursery. It's like, there's a certain sort of spookiness about, there's this notion of, there's an adult issue that's going on here, even though it's seductive, and children just love it. But they're really threatened by it, which I'm really happy about.
Yeah, and that is a running theme in your artwork, is this idea of using a toy-like quality, or to discuss these very real adult intricate issues that are so complex, but in some ways, as a culture, adults, we don't know how to even have these conversations in an adult manner.
Facilitate that. Your show and what we're doing with that is we're facilitating dialogue.
Yeah.
In a sense, like this show, that my solo show, is actually part of a library. I'm really happy about that. So that the gallery is a room in the library, which is really exciting to me, because when you're going there with a bunch of kids, perhaps they'll be looking for books, but then all of a sudden they have this visual experience. And so the idea of allowing these three-dimensional images that have such hopefully a potent quality can spur further research for these kids, or questions that maybe might be addressed to the librarian or whoever. I don't exactly know how they're going to provide docents or whatever it is, but I know it's a library, and so there'll be a librarian that these kids or adults could possibly corral and to pose questions to.
Oh, and that would be lovely, actually.
A really long show too.
Like suggested accompanied reading material to go with the exhibition. So we're going to take a look at, this is called Arborist.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about this piece?
Sure. This is the hand in a more benign context, because I was thinking about the arborist, who is the person who cares for the trees, who, in a sense, yes, he or she will dismember a tree that's diseased, but also the intention of an arborist is to nurture growth, is to nurture the tree. And so I really like that, because heretofore I've been using the hand motif as an impact of man's activity, of the human culture, in a sort of critical, not a very sort of a benign sense, the touch of man, we have really destroyed a lot. And we have not been very nice in any of our processes. And even if we start moving into the culture, the idea of, shot dead, which is that piece you have in your show, we've been cruel, and so to put a hand now within this idea of a nurturing, the piece is really almost, it's 3.5 feet tall, isn't it? Yeah, no, it's almost 4 feet. It's almost 4 feet. I make these and I forget. It stands be a nice size.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting that you describe the hand as a nurturer, the nurturing quality of the arborist. Because when I look at this piece, I see these what almost appear to be spikes jutting out.
Almost tongues or leaves.
Okay. And what is the meaning behind the leaves, tongues?
Well, the whole hand is sort of a weird sort of version of a tree, and so the tree is blossoming. And I've noticed this going through my county park. It's remarkable what will grow forth from trees or the stumps that are left, whether it be fungus or whether they be actually a whole nother sort of version of the tree will be coming forth. So there'll be sprouting another sort of shoot from a partially damaged or felled tree. So it seems like the idea of the vitality of a living organism that the trees all are a part of hasn't been destroyed. It's coming to life.
And what's really amazing when you say that is it is truly amazing how resilient nature is in the face of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we have been extraordinarily destructful, and like as a society, we don't seem to look back on any of it. And we are this collective destructive force, but the environment and just keeps trying to find ways to survive and pick itself up and put it back together again. And I hope it continues to do that.
Well, the response to it is really what I was hoping to get with this piece. The idea that it is a positive force. We can, if we choose to be a positive influence on nature, as well as with the clear cut. It was really that's sort of a negative impact with the cut hands that were all at the base. This is a more positive note. It's not like jumping for joy, It's a little brooding, but I think the idea of that we have to think about there's roles that we need to have in the management of our forests. And it's very important that we have intelligent, well-educated people. And that seems to be sort of a challenged position that educated and professional individuals seem to have in our culture. There is a questioning whether or not these sort of, you could say the custodians are sort of not necessarily like our guys next door, or I'm trying to avoid becoming too political. Trump. It's just like there's an anti-intellectualism right now in the country, and it's very detrimental to so many things.
We really do have an anti-intellectualism issue. I feel as though historically we've always had that issue, though. Like even like one of the first people who's they were working on I guess one of the outbreaks. I don't think it was the New York outbreak. What was that one?
The flu. The flu.
It wasn't the flu. It was the not dysentery.
Typhoid.
Typhoid. It was typhoid, I believe, where one of the first people doing the investigation was basically saying everyone needs to start washing your hands, and he was scoffed at. So I mean, I think what happens is we are very anti-intellectual until like maybe a generation passes of this new knowledge that we appears, and then we accept it, kind of a thing.
Let's hope that the COVID-19 will give us a lesson, you know, that
Yeah.
we can learn from. And it seems like we are not necessarily being sort of coaxed by a leadership that is sympathetic to the point where, you know, this is serious and we all have to take it to consideration and realize that we're fighting, even though you're just sitting at home. You are fighting the virus. And I think that type of activity, by not doing outside activity, is going to be one of the successful tools to control this pandemic, this disease that's still uncontrolled.
Absolutely, and they're even saying that the less human activity as a result of the pandemic has been helping the environment in ways we didn't even think would be possible.
Yeah, but it's been a very long. I think my wife and I figured out it's over 6 months that we've had the lockdown, and what does that mean for the economy? Yes, it is a terrific hit, and there are many people who are suffering terrible situations because their businesses have closed, their jobs have folded, you know, their savings have diminished, and it's been a horrible thing for many people.
Yeah, and we really are experiencing what I believe is two different versions of the pandemic, between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what's seriously impacting so many other people is not even touching the lives of others, really.
This is another piece that I've made. I actually made so many pieces now that I'm inside and I can't get out. And once again, it's one of these fantasies, I guess you could say, or fictions about a tree trunk. And some trees, when they fall, they lose their bark, or they sort of lose their limbs, including their roots. And I noticed walking through some of the forest that some of these trunks almost have a star-like quality when they're leaning over. And so I just found that shape fascinating. And also the idea that the core of the tree has been eaten out. And it's just once again, sort of an interesting shape and surface. And once again, it's fabricated entirely with the things from the forest, whether it be bark, whether it be twigs, whether it's even been literally the sawdust that I have sort of gathered from cutting these things up and used to make a mixed media, almost paper mache-like quality for this dark surface that's the bottom of this piece. It looks like the bottom of this piece.
And how did you achieve the it looks incredibly smooth where there is no bark. Was that
that's the armature. I construct the armature in such a way that I can put a surface, whether it be bark or twigs or something like that. So I've thought about this thing so that though the piece is not finished, it's sort of designed and constructed in my mind. So I can make decisions as to how to resolve the piece with something, whether it be actual bark in the case of this on the outside of the piece, or twigs at the top, or this sort of fabricated surface with this sort of, I guess you could say, perforated dot pattern on the underside of this tree. This is because the tree is leaning over. I'm using the term underside, but it's actually the side of it, but it would be where the roots would be. So the pieces, they're obsessive. They just take weeks. And because I don't leave the house, I have weeks to do it. Like it's 7 or 8 hours a day, sometimes longer. And it's very slow. when you think about it like this, the piece, the detail at the top with the tiny cross sections of the twigs, the lower right hand, each one of those are put onto that surface. They're tiny little pieces.
Wow.
That, maybe half of an inch tall, but they're like, and I think these were under a quarter of an inch in diameter. So there's hundreds of them. And it's an absolutely obsessive work. And but that's what's sort of mesmerizing about it too, that who would build this thing? You know, why would you spend the time to make a tree that is rotting in the woods? In a sense, there's a certain dichotomy that it is a fanciful notion of the tree, but it's also, in a sense, glorifying a process that, in terms of the loss of the tree is being returned to the soil and actually regenerating a whole nother tree indirectly.
Mm.
And so, in a sense, it's a wonderful notion of the renewal of nature.
Well, it's so funny that you say that, because I was just, I mean, I was thinking what a beautiful piece this is, and it just has like this very peaceful quality to it, and it does feel as though it's growing into something new, especially from the side where it's been quote unquote uprooted from, where the roots are. It feels like it's literally changing to something else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping to get out of the piece. And I made this one I finished it about 2 months ago. And I realized, I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. And then I got another idea. And so I had to start on that one. So,
so when you're constructing these, would you say you are very meticulous and methodical in the way that you place the bark and the rings, or is it more of a meditative process and you kind of like let it
I would like to say that I'm a wonderfully passive and just very enlightened individual, but I'm absolutely not. A challenge to do these things, and I just don't stop. I get into problems and then I have to redo them, but because I'm very conceptual in my process of construction, there isn't a really grand and specific drawing for these things. If I didn't finish them and I popped off, as a friend of mine would use the term, you couldn't finish it because there would be no diagram. There would be direction. You know, it's very conceptual for the whole process for me, including sometimes when I renovate them. But it's not. I would not say I'm a very sort of monk-like character.
So I think we'll take a look at what you have currently on exhibit with us at Chashama Matawan.
Sounds great.
So this is your first piece, Shot Dead. Could you tell us a little bit about this one, George?
Yeah. Actually, it was made over a long period of time. I did carve the head, and I did make the pedestal, and I found the letters. They're manufactured probably laser cut letters. They're beautiful. And they're really, you know, why go through all that labor when you could just find them and use them to be effective? Because I'm not opposed to using ready-mades, but this head is completely fabricated. I laminated the wood, I carved it, and then I figured out the base to be appropriate. And I really think about the idea of it being this memorial to not only to African Americans, but also to Mexicans, because I lived on the border for a long time.
Yeah.
Especially on the border. This is just, I get so upset hearing the latest reports on these people being separated from their kids. I just can't imagine that. That's just so horrible that we're being such a cruel nation. And, you know, it's, and some of them are, you know, they're drowning in the Rio Grande, and I worked on the Rio Grande for 10 years, and so all of those things are just very familiar to me. And especially right now where COVID-19 is just ravaging that portion. It's called the Rio Grande Valley right now. It's just, there's a number of things that I still have attachment to, but this piece is more of the violence done to individuals and how basically they're just, in a sense, part of a memorial.
And from what I understand, I never really spent much time on the border, but from what I understand, people in in the northern parts of the country, or really anywhere else that do not live and experience the border, there's this economy. The economy really relies on the fact that the border is open, because there's people going back and forth to work daily. It's not about just people coming in and staying. People cross the border to go to school, or cross the border to go to work, and then they go back home.
Yeah, and we have used Mexicans as guest workers for decades. We have had open relations which were very, very compatible with our agriculture. And they would come over and they would work. And actually, some of the kids that I taught who were part of migrant families, they were still traveling. They would leave school in the fall and go and pick something, whatever was growing in Massachusetts or whatever. And they would be gone for a month or 2 months, and then they would come back. And so I don't know how they would complete their education, but they had to go because the family needed that manpower, kids, but
Yeah. And that's another thing. I don't think a lot of Americans really realize how much our economy relies on immigrants or Mexican residents who come and migrate just for like a season, and then they go back home for periods of time. And not only do we not realize how much we rely on that economy, but we also don't realize how underpaid they are. And which is, again, another form of violence in a way to a group of people, because we are taking advantage of them economically.
Developing a sense that they could provide for themselves if they just had some system that is going to be comfortable, that allows them to plant themselves so that they can be prosperous.
And it all comes down to being given access and opportunity, or keeping it from people.
Yeah. This is that shooting that happened in Connecticut. All those little kids that were shot by another young man who was suffering from, I don't know if it was some type of autistic crisis or whatever it is, but this is the shooting in the Connecticut school, the elementary school, where so many kids lost their lives, including their teachers who were trying to protect. And I was just horrified. And so I made this piece sort of like as a toy, as a mixture of toys, and kind of to work with that notion of children being sort of sacrificed, but also a benign way of thinking about them being memorialized.
And what's interesting about the school shootings, especially the first, this was really one of the first big ones that happened, was Sandy, and or Sandy Hook rather, and everyone thought this was going to be the catalyst for change, and it clearly wasn't. And at that point, I think I feel like that was bottom when it came to having the conversation about where putting limitations or more on gun access and gun control, and we've never gotten out of that bottom.
Well, the NRA has been dealt some serious blows in the last couple of weeks of months. Its president, LaPierre, is under indictment for mismanaging funds. And it looks like the NRA has lost a lot of its power simply because of internal corruption. So let's just see what happens in the next few months. Hopefully we'll have a change of administration, and so that there will be a more benign way of thinking about what guns are for self-protection and what guns are being used or misused for carnage.
It would be lovely if something came from it. I do have to give props to the New York prosecutor. I don't know her name, but she is an amazing woman, and she's doing really great work. And she's at the head of the Jean LaPierre case.
Yeah, I was thrilled to hear that too.
Yeah. So this is Guns Kill.
It's sort of it's playing with the idea of toys, but at the same time, toys that have a context that is, sort of basically horrific. How, there's parts of, and now Washington is an urban area. And there's parts of Washington that are absolutely gorgeous, beautiful homes and stuff like that. But then there's some areas in the urban areas that perhaps you might be hearing pop, 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 and it's not a firecracker. It's a gunshot. We literally had a kid shot, what was it, 2 days ago? A policeman actually shot him, and carrying a gun, and it's a controversy that's coming up. And so in a sense, our nation's capital is not immune to this, and so the pop, 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 the guns kill is part of the language, the environment here too. Not only is it in Wisconsin, but it's here as well as many other urban areas.
Yeah, and this piece actually it really speaks to me on the level of, in a way, of how I think guns throughout my childhood, I don't. Well, no, it's still being perpetuated. This idea that guns are these toys and they're fun, and they're sometimes marketed to children, through water guns, or little kids playing cops and robbers, or that sort of idea that because we make it, as a culture, we make it this playful, fun thing for kids. They don't necessarily see that see how dangerous it is and how dangerous guns are.
Now, my grandsons are, there's no one in the family has a gun. No one has a gun in the family. And they are mimicking what they see on television, because they're kids who are exposed to contemporary culture that is via media. And they'll pick up something and it's a broom, and they'll bang, 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 bang. It's just like, wow, okay. There's a point in time you just hope they outgrow it. They sort of move away from that. And here's their grandfather making these things that literally look like toy guns, And so so that there's a language that we're using to discourage, but not to stigmatize, and to try to hopefully challenge them to think about things. But they're young, and so hopefully there's a window that we can entertain, but also allow a gentle learning.
Oh, yeah. And if you think about it, they're probably receiving so many mixed messages, because on one hand, they're being told that, that these are fun toys to play with. And on the other hand, they have to endure active shooter drills at school.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's truly amazing. Just truly amazing. So I just, I don't know if I ever had that growing up, because it's been decades since I've been in their position. But it's the idea of what we have to do for our children now is remarkable. And the mindset that we as adults have to go through in order to protect our kids is just staggering.
And then this is Sacrilege, Mother Emanuel.
I think this one is especially difficult, And I think it's very successful because it is so succinct. I was horrified when I learned that that young man, Roof, literally was seated with these people who invited him into their private Bible study.
Mm.
And he sat there for an hour, and then he took out a gun and shot them. And he had made sure that one survived so they would have witness to what he had done. And so he wanted this event to memorialize his event, and so it could function as possibly the beginning, I heard, of some kind of race war. You know, and it just, to me, the fact that here is this church, and church is supposed to be a place where you learn of the spiritual value, and you know, you pay your obeisance to the deity, and they went in and literally, well, this kid went in there, young man, and shot these people. It's just so dreadful. It's just so dreadful.
Yeah, and it's horrifying, and it goes back to that double standard that we are experiencing with how the police treat people who commit crimes and acts of violence. After Dylan Roof was arrested, they took him to a Burger King, and they let him, you know, sat him down and let him eat some Burger King, and
Really?
yeah.
Oh God, I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, so that's how the police treated him after he murdered all of these people. But meanwhile, you know, a person of color is looks at a police officer the wrong way or uses the slightest wrong movement of body language, and they say that warranted them to shoot them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. It's not a good place that we have right now in our culture.
George, do you have your upcoming solo exhibition? Is there a way people would be able to access that if they can't see it physically at the gallery space?
Let's see if I can get I have a file here. The Montpellier, Montpellier Art Center in Laurel, Maryland. And it opens at the end of the month of okay, it's part of the Parks and Recreation for Prince George's County of Maryland, and it's 9652 Muirkirk Road, Muirkirk Road, Laurel, Maryland. And there's a telephone number, 301-377-7807. And that could get that the contact person, the assistant director on the line, Sarah Morgan, if you wanted to contact her about this show. The show opens Halloween night.
Oh, wow.
Through January 3rd. So it's a long show.
That's a long exhibition.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
As I said, there's nothing really happening in DC in terms of venues for contemporary artists. There are, if they are, they're very, very few. So I'm quite happy that they're doing this for that long. And as I said before, it's part of a library, which I think is so exciting because kids could go and see these things and hopefully get somebody who is like a librarian to explain things to them.
It would be really nice if they could come up with a suggested reading selection or research to accompany the exhibition. Well,
Sarah Morgan has contacted me and they put together, it sounds like news releases and things on that order. And if anyone wants to contact her, it's Sarah, SarahMorgan@pgparks.com. And you could possibly email her if there was something that someone would want to know about it. But it's the Montpellier Arts Center in Laurel, Maryland.
And what is the title of your exhibition? I don't think you mentioned that to us.
Arboretum.
Arboretum.
Yes, so it's a
Nice.
play on that notion of the arborist.
Nice. And yeah, so I think we're going to wrap up. Congratulations on your upcoming solo exhibition. I hope it goes well.
Thank you.
And for those of you that are interested in seeing Thoughts and Prayers up at Chashama Matawan, we are on exhibit through September 19th. You can make an appointment through arthustle.net, and you can schedule to either come see the gallery in its physical location in New Jersey, or you can see the gallery online through the virtual exhibition space. Thoughts and Prayers, Another Round of Vacant Stares is an analysis on American gun culture and how gun violence affects our daily lives. And we are in partnership with Chashama, Moms Demand Action, Unload, and Gays Against Guns. I'd like to thank you, George, for joining us today.
Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You have a good evening.
You too.